sort of early high school, I grew up on a dairy farm in the North Coast. The economics were pretty poor. Basically we milked cows and sold cream, had pigs and all that sort of stuff. I guess I'd always wanted to go to university. I wanted to do engineering. That was what I had in my head. I probably actually was angling at civil engineering because there was something about working outside, and I guess at some point I'd kind of figured out I actually had to work at school to get a decent HSC result.
Okay.
But anyway, I got a job with BHP as a mechanical engineering cadet. Go to Wollongong, you can go and study, got a job, it's close to the surf. What more could you want?
So it wasn't the steel industry as such, but you've stayed in the steel industry,
Yeah.
right? So there must have been some sort of thing that
Well, look,
grabbed
I mean,
your attention.
when I started, I probably had no intention of sort of staying. It was an avenue to get a job and get an education.
Yes.
I suppose, we started in the training shops.
Yes.
And then I ended up over in the tin mill, sort of in maintenance in the tin mill. And, and then I ended up on the slab caster in 1978, or before we actually commissioned. I think the first slab caster commissioned in November 1978. I ended up on that.
Whilst you're still a trainee?
Yeah, well, I was a trainee, and you learned so much. But in a way, we kind of also, it's really interesting work, and dealing with the people and dealing with the engineering side of it and dealing with kind of the management, sometimes pretty challenging, pretty tough characters. Dealing with all that, it was really interesting, and I loved that stuff. It was intellectually stimulating, but I love work too. That was the first slab caster was ever commissioned in Australia, so it was the first one that BHP did. And it was really tough. But you got challenged all the time. Yeah.
I've got to ask you, your days at uni, the university medal and a series of awards. What was your secret? Is it something that just came naturally to you, or did you have to work super hard?
I worked hard. Yeah. Just learn how to study and do okay at that sort of stuff. And I don't know.
Anyway, you were very good at it, obviously, and
I worked. I did. Bit of work and bit of luck is sort of secret to a lot of things, isn't it? Yeah. Do you want to go on production? And I guess I went, well, if I'm going to stay, that's the guts of what we do.
Yeah.
So I went on shift work then. Worked in the BOS on shift work, sort of doing pretty much every job on shift in the BOS on production. Everything from sort of blowing heats on the furnace to doing injection heats at the back of the furnace to teaming ingots. It was easy when you're on the maintenance side to be sort of critical of what the operators were doing.
Sure.
Or what they did or what they didn't do. And probably when I was in that space, I did all the same things, right? Because you're kind of under pressure, you're doing the best you can, stuff doesn't quite work out the way you thought it would work out. It was a kind of a learning curve, but a bit humbling too, right?
Yeah.
Because you'd sort of come at it from the maintenance angle, and then go, well, actually it's not so straightforward. got to learn it. But the other, that's always the case, right? So
it must have meant a bit to you, I guess, when you came back recently when they celebrated 50 years of that process.
Yeah.
Because some of those people you're talking about were there that day.
Yeah, they sure were. Yeah, Mike Bripton, Leo Selleck, there's a
Bill Fernie,
Chris Carey, Bill Wilkins. A lot of history there. Yeah, so I spent a long time in slab making. Yeah. I ended up in Whyalla, starting up a caster and shutting down the ingot route. It took us a long time to fully shut down the ingot route here in Port Canberra after that number 2 casters shut up. So there was a lot of learning out of that. We actually operated for the first 12 months. We didn't have a breakout. Was but that was just all the stuff that everyone had learnt, and we sort of put together about what the discipline. I was sort of talking about operating practices and disciplines, about what the practices were that we had to have to be able to achieve that, And then this study with North Star was going on, and because I got wind that they were looking for someone to go to be the VP of operations, and I sort of talked about it with my wife, with Elizabeth, and we went, that sounds like an adventure. I mean, essentially what we were doing was copying what Nucor had done
Yes.
with Crawfordsville,
Yeah.
and going, we can do this better. So maybe we're a bit overconfident, but anyway. But now today, I mean, it's a beautiful process. I mean, I got the opportunity basically because probably my history with steel making and casting. I didn't know a whole lot about hot strip mills, but I learned a lot.
So when you came back,
Yeah.
this was the time that BHP decided that they didn't want to be in the steel business any longer.
Essentially, my job was separating a lot of the contracts that we had to kind of do the best we can. It was like negotiating with your boss, actually, which was an interesting sort of dynamic, you know.
Yeah.
But
I can remember the photo of you all hanging out the train and ringing the bells. I've got a bell on the shelf just there that you...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I'm not sure if this is the right word to use, but we were facing an existential threat to the front end of our business, were we? And
we sure were, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of the analysts were basically saying shut Port Kembla Steelworks, right? Like the drumbeat from the external market was we should shut the front end. Like I mean, it was the whole of BlueScope, right? It was everybody was really focused on that and aligned around what do we need to do to make this successful. So I mean, there was no sort of like that alignment's powerful, right? And it's everybody in the organisation, everybody, the shop floor people.
Ask you, have you got a favourite process that sort of, you know, has endeared itself to you?
Yeah, favourite process. Well, Craig, I guess I say the only thing I really know anything about is slab making. You know, like when you sort of live it on shift, you probably understand it to a level that you never understand other stuff. I'm not going to say I loved it 100% of the time, because sometimes you didn't, right? But 95% of the time, it was exciting, and you know, there's plenty of that stuff in this industry. There's plenty of opportunities. You go back to 2015. There's a bit of a personal thing in there. Like I don't know. You can say it's pride, whatever you want to put it. But I mean, there's such a history of people that you work with that you're actually sort of working to build on what they've done. You know, you just go, I don't want to be the one that's sort of shutting this down.
Yes.
Don't, right?
Yeah. Thank you for having that approach to begin with, because the place has been kept alive, right? And it's good.
Yeah. There's a lot of people.
For all of us.
It's not just me, Craig. There's
of course, but you're in the chair at certain times when it really mattered.
A lot of people sort of contribute to that, and were committed to it. Work really hard, you know. We went through all that stuff with the stave stuff on number 5 blast furnace. But on the ground, you know, there were people on the ground sort of living that.
Yeah.
You know, day shift, afternoon shift, night, you know, day, night, like on the ground, sort of living those water leaks, living sort of what was going on, living sort of making it all happen. I mean, there's a lot of people.
I'm really glad to see that you're joining the BlueScope board and you're not lost to us completely.
Yeah.
So, and I just think that's a fantastic arrangement. So I wish you well with that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Craig. Shareholders willing.